it's Thor again. So apparently it's already been 6 months since the last devlog. Sorry about that. I didn't quite realize how fast time flies. But I will try to keep the devlogs a bit more frequent, so the next one should hopefully be less than 6 months from now. But luckily I've been hard at work with Scorching Engines, my solo developed FPS survival game set aboard a giant vehicle in a frozen wasteland, inspired by Mad Max, Mortal Engines and Snowpiercer. And hey, it's got a Steam page, so I'd really appreciate it if you wishlisted it, if you're interested of course. I also have a Discord now, focused on the development of the game, discussing features and feedback. So if you want to see more progress on the game, you can join that as well. A lot of things have changed since the last devlog, and a lot of things will continue to change as I've got plenty of ideas and plenty of stuff to do. I do however want to preface this by saying that unfortunately working on Scorching Engines isn't my main job, and therefore I only have an hour or two a day at most to work on it. But despite that, as you can see, there's been a bit of a graphical change as there are now snowy trees that fall over when harvested, new snow on the ground with fancy deformation, a nice fog and clouds, cities, and a brand new design for the vehicle. I've also added the ability to define different types of resource zones with different resource assets, so that I can have some zones that are denser forests and some that are almost only rocks. Where currently I've used it to have the normal resource zones and then some that are filled with larger rocks, such as large stone arches which can block the vehicle. Additionally, the vehicle has gotten a major redesign, so it's no longer just a small platform going along, but actually looks like a somewhat realistic vehicle. This new redesign is much larger and it even has an interior and multiple floors, so it looks a bit more intimidating and a bit more like it could actually save the world with its powerful heat core. This also leads to some different gameplay as it takes more time to get to and from the controls and resources, and you therefore have to be a bit more deliberate in where you steer the vehicle. I also want to add a more detailed interior, as right now it's very minimalistic, and perhaps I can also make it so you can decorate it a bit manually. It shouldn't be too difficult, hopefully. But it's not just a graphical change over the last 6 months, I've also redone the controls for the vehicle, where you now have to enter a steering mode instead of pressing on small buttons on a panel. This change was done because the small buttons weren't easy enough to interact with and some playtesters had difficulty with them. Partially due to my fault, as there was a bug leading to the player's raycast not hitting the center of the screen, as it was jittering a bunch due to the vehicle movement and some desync between the camera and the raycast position. Unfortunately, even after fixing this, it was too much of a hassle to use the buttons, as you had to keep changing where you were looking while the ship was turning, and you couldn't see where you were going. I was thinking about making it a sort of semi-automatic steering, where you look at a button and as long as you hold down the interact key, you can keep looking around and it will stay pressed. Alternatively, using a bit of aim assist to keep the mouse centered on the button, but both of these options felt like bad workarounds to a problem that shouldn't exist. The new steering mode sees you walking up to the control panel, pressing the interact key, and then you steer around with WASD and space, while the mouse controls and where you're looking is unaffected. However, the bad experience while driving the vehicle wasn't just limited to interacting with the control panels. It also had a lot of awkward player collision interaction and subpar movement. Luckily, after doing a bunch of testing and trying out a lot of different fixes, settings and tweaks, I managed to fix the vehicle jitter, which was both very annoying from a graphical perspective, but also made it very difficult for the player to walk around on the ship, and even more so when you tried to jump, as the direction you jumped in wasn't guaranteed to be the direction you wanted. I also managed to find a different solution for the vehicle controls and information panels, which didn't involve any UI elements, as they were awful to work with and were really messing me up. The jittering UI that I had before was honestly also really ruining my mood when working on the game, as it made the game feel cheap and poorly made, and it did not make me want to continue work on it. Seeing how I had spent countless nights trying to find solutions for ECS UI, or moving UI elements without jitter, according to the movement of rigid bodies and velocities, it was really annoying and was a pretty big blocker in the development of the game, as it was something that had to be solved before I could continue with other features. On top of that, it also had to be solved in order for me to actually want to work on the game, but I persevered as I don't want to give up on a project I've worked on for 2 years. Luckily, I managed to come up with a different method using physical objects as an alternative for the sliders, so it looks like power buttons lighting up. Additionally, I found a solution for the text, which involves converting it into a texture and using the same decal shader as the bullet holes for projecting it onto the control panel. This however means that I can't change the text as easily, especially not during runtime, as I have to bake it into a texture, so translating those texts will be pretty difficult once I get around to translations. Therefore, I'll have to come up with some nice icons to use instead of text, so it's language agnostic. Another benefit from this solution, other than my sanity and the game not looking as much like garbage, is that it's more performant than having UI elements. Another very important change is that the vehicle can now also finally reverse. Rejoice! As you no longer have to turn the ship all the way around when getting stuck. Additionally, a significant change to the interaction between the player and the vehicle is that when the player dies, which they now can do, is that they respawn on the vehicle, or the closest respawn point should they somehow die in the beginning area. Where the idea is that you get 3 lives before it's game over, and each time you die the vehicle gets damaged. I was thinking that this damage could be represented as a semi-permanent debuff to the vehicle's stats, causing it to drive more slowly, burn more fuel and produce less power. But I'm not fully sold on this idea, and I might go down a different route in regards to how death affects the experience. As having infinite lives is too easy, as there is no penalty for the dying, so that's a no-go, but having too few deaths or too punishable deaths would make it pretty annoying to play. And degrading the ship too much might make the situation impossible to survive. I still have no idea whether or not the vehicle itself should be able to take physical damage where parts would fall off and would start being in pieces, as I would then have to add base building to the game so you can repair it again, and all of the other issues that come from that. Such as you being able to make your own vehicle, as that would quickly spiral into being a pretty major shift in the game's balance and its identity, even though it could be pretty fun to have vehicular base building. Therefore, I was thinking that this damage to the vehicle's stats would also be repairable, leading to you also regaining the lost lives, so you have a chance, but also so the vehicle isn't permanently nerfed. It would however have to be pretty costly to repair the vehicle, and perhaps also use some rare resources. These rare resources would of course need to have a place to spawn, a rare place that's perhaps also dangerous. Therefore I've begun implementing large ruined cities that will spawn across the world, where currently they're not much to look at, just a few different building pieces scattered in a grid with some gaps for ruined cars and special city resource zones, as well as wide enough streets for the vehicle to drive on them. However, once I get more progress done on them, they will hopefully have interable buildings, resources that can only be obtained in cities, and rare vehicle upgrades that will be more powerful than normal upgrades. Additionally, I'm planning on making it so that there will be special Bandit Camp variants that spawn in cities, with a different look and are perhaps also more dangerous than the normal Bandit Camps. Unfortunately, I haven't implemented Bandit Camps yet, but they are in progress. As you can see, I've made it so that objects can deform the terrain so it fits to their shape, which I'll use to make the Bandit Camps less jank by not clipping into the terrain or hovering far above. These Bandit Camps will also play a pretty significant role in the game's story, as they will contain vital parts needed to progress the gameplay. For the story of the game, I've started working on the starting area, the research facility, which will also work as a sort of tutorial to the game. This research facility is where the heat core is being prototyped and the vehicle built. In the future, the raiders will however be attacking this facility, and you have to escape in the vehicle, leaving some necessary vehicle parts behind which the raiders have now taken for themselves. This means that you now have to go to the bandit camps in order to get back the part of the vehicle, before you can bring the vehicle and the heat core to the colony, as it won't be fully operational without them. Therefore, I would love to be able to have a nice variety in the bandit camps, some being in cities as mentioned, some amidst a bunch of large rocks blocking the vehicle from getting close, and some more generic looking camps with wooden palisades or similar. As for the gameplay, the idea is that they're going to play out a bit like outposts in Far Cry, where you have to go clear them and do so stealthily or just guns blazing. Alternatively, just sneak in and grab the required resource or component and sneak out again. This does, however, mean that I have to add a sort of stealth system where the enemies don't immediately know where you are and cannot see you if you are behind them. Although that might be a bit too enthusiastic, so let's see if I can pull it off. In preparation for more advanced AI, I have just now finished reworking the entire pathfinding implementation I had made, the one with a voxel representation of the world and 3-dimensional A-star pathfinding, replacing it with a more traditional nav mesh based solution, which means that I can now also pre-compute nav meshes for better quality and more performance. So that means that the last devlog is pretty much obsolete already, at least when it comes to the pathfinding part of that video. Another benefit is that I can much more efficiently update the pathfinding representation of the vehicle, which means that raiders can technically board the vehicle now, albeit not in motion as they glide off of it, but I will be fixing that so they can pathfind around on the vehicle. I know that 6 months between devlogs is way too long, and I will try to keep them more regular and more focused. Hopefully I can make it a good devlog about the cities and then another one about the bandit camps. But as I said, there's a lot of work to do and I have a limited amount of time to work on the game, which is why the devlogs fell behind as much as they did. Sorry about that. Although, if you're interested in more frequent game updates, you can join the Discord, as I often post what I'm currently working on in the game, and sometimes stream on Twitch while I'm working. Additionally, you can provide feedback and discuss ideas before and during implementation. Scorching Engines has a Steam page, and I would really appreciate it if you wishlisted it, as we're currently sitting on 143 wishlists, and I would love to get that number higher, especially if the game is to have any success at succeeding upon release.